Alright, hey guys, UnoPro here today. Very exciting video. We are joined by TheScientist. Big thanks for coming along. We're going to be going over his Vanar deck, which he's had a lot of success with on the ladder, and going to look at some replays, talk about some plays. So, Scientist, did you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah. First of all, thanks for having me on, Uno. I'm a big fan of your videos and your work, so it's great that we can do a video together. Um, yeah, play Duelist. Not a ton of other gaming experience, but I'm really enjoying this one, so that's about it for me.
Alright, awesome. Let's get into the deck. So, first thing stands out to me is the 2 Dream Gazer. I've seen that going back and forth a bit in Vanar lists. Not great in the Songhai matchup, but pretty good value otherwise. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I would prefer to have three, but there just aren't enough deck slots. I actually don't consider it as much of a liability in the Songhai matchup, and I actually want three in that one. Uh, Due to the fact that I run three Razorback, and if Songhai chooses to ignore your board, when you can go Dream Gazer like into Razorback and also use the Primus Fist, you can very oftentimes outrace them if you're just slightly careful with your positioning. So having them is actually an advantage in that matchup, I believe.
Okay, yeah, I can definitely see that, especially now that I feel like Songhai's got a little bit, less bursty, a little bit more board control. You don't really see the pure aggro list, stopping out at 3 mana. A lot of them going Artifact Hunters, Emerald Rejuvenators. Like, I'm not even playing Inner Focus, so I can see face damage is a little bit less important, and board control wise, they're an amazing card, really.
Mm-hmm. For sure.
Alright, so the 2 Hearth Sisters, what kind of tech is this for? Is this for Songhai matchup? Is it for Lionar kind of stuff?
So it provides another answer to mini Jaxes, which, because I've taken out the Blood Tier Alchemists, you don't really want to be using a Chromatic Cold just on a mini Jax. If you can get a Jaxie early, then it's not so much of a problem. Um, and the deck really benefits when you can sort of distribute threats across different areas. Uh, you benefit a lot from board control in that sense. Um, Furthermore, it's particularly useful tech against Magmar, which is a matchup this deck has difficulty with. You are encouraged to play large threats out of Egmorph and Metamorphosis range, and then you Hearth Sister them in to get value before they get single target removed.
Yeah, it's definitely a card I like, and it makes me a lot more comfortable playing without Blood Tier. A lot of time when I'm building like a deck like Vanar or something that has a bad Songhai matchup, there's a lot of Songhai on the ladder still, so you kind of want to play around it, and it really replaces the Blood Tier in a lot of situations. Vanar runs like a lot of sticky minions like Fenrir and Jaxi that you don't really want to attack into, and by Hearth Sistering into range, it's basically the same thing as a Blood Tier, but now your minion's also in a more useful position a lot of the time.
Hmm.
So I really like that in lots of matchups. I think Abyssin's the only one where it doesn't feel as strong, but stuff like Lionheart's obviously good against Zeal and Provokes. As you're saying with Magma. Alright, so onto the top end of the deck. 2-drop wires are pretty stable, so not much to talk about there. 3 Fenrirs as always. So we've got
Hmm.
3 Razorback. How have you felt about having 3 Razorback? It's personally something I'm a big fan of.
Yeah, it improves the consistency of the deck. With all the little two drops, I feel also a lot more comfortable using a Razorback just to hit one minion early on if it trades up well. And if you hit two, then you're just doing fantastic, right? So it's one of those things. The deck is certainly aims to, like, the principle of the deck is to get ahead or even heading into your power turns 5 and 6. Because you run three Dancing Blades, if you've already infiltrated, depending on the matchup, just a naked Frosthorn Rhino can be game winning, especially against Abyssian, who doesn't typically have an answer. Um, Archons as well are meant to improve certain control matchups that the deck was struggling against when you ran three Jax True Sight and no other big minions.
Yeah, yeah, definitely.
Yeah,
So
and having the three Razorbacks, also you still run two Jax True Sights. That's still one of the primary win conditions of the deck. And if you do get a Jax to stick, you really want to have a Razorback. And having three, again, just improves the consistency of being able to hit that goal.
Yeah, I can definitely attest to, as a Songhai player myself, just how good Jax is in that matchup. A lot of time, we don't consider Vanar a great matchup against Songhai, but when a Jax hits on turn 6, those are the games I tend to lose more often than any other, games go. So we're running two copies of both Spirit of the Wild and Frosthorn Rhino, and I really like this. It adds a lot of burst to Vanar and can punish, decks that are trying to stall or Songhai that's trying to run away and slowly burst you down. Um, what
Hmm.
are your thoughts on the inclusion of two copies of this? Because I know you used to run just one all the time.
Yeah, so I was running. I had always run two Spirit of the Wild and one Frosthorn Rhino, and I found myself wanting Frosthorn Rhino more often than I wanted, say, just another Dream Gazer to replace. Because especially in the Lionar matchup, which is one of the better counters to this deck, um, the Frosthorn Rhino Spirit of the Wild combo is a very common lethal situation against them. Uh, and as far as out of hand burst goes, it used to be the Frosthorn Rhino combo used to be a joke, but now 14 damage with two cards is actually a pretty serious thing, especially in a meta where generals are aggressively using their face to clear minions starting from turn one, and little bits of chip damage really start to add up. And when you know that that's a condition you can play to in your deck, it gives you a lot more strategic options sort of on the middle turns.
Yeah, I definitely like the kind of goal of this deck. It's very good at finishing out the game, and I think it kind of abused the notion that I know even myself, I get very comfortable versing a Vayner. I'm not worried about dying too much of the time. But Frostborn Rhino combo, 14 damage, even just a Fenrir on the board, um, active Fenrir on your opponent's side of the board, Razorback and Spirit of the Wild. It's not that uncommon, and that's a ton of damage. Is that 13 damage? 5, 4,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. So, like, yeah, no. I think that's a good point. So imagine you have just an opponent just has a single Fenrir on the board, right? And they're on 8 mana. If you Razorback Spirit of the Wild, that's 10, 10, or that's 5 plus 5 plus 4
4,
from the
14, yeah.
Razorback plus 2 from the general hit. Like a single 3 attack minion on 8 mana requires two cards to be able to do 16 damage with a general hit.
That is a power level that you don't really see. You don't expect it from Vanar. You don't expect to have that 16 damage out of nowhere. We
Mhm.
simply get a Fenrir on the board, and it's not a card you want to trade into. So Fenrir, Razorback, Spirit of the Wild finisher is definitely something I can see being very, very effective. Alright, so I think
Yeah.
that's pretty much we've covered most of the intricacies of the deck. A lot of it's more standard Vanar stuff in that. So I think we'll get into some replays. Alright, so let me just pull up the scientist profile here. Okay, so as you can see, we are very lucky to be joined by the current number one player on the S rank ladder. I'm just going to quickly black screen my screen so that we can't see the results of the replay. Alright, so our first game is in fact against a very popular player. I'm sure you know Mogwai, and he's versing a Vetruvian. How do you feel that the deck matches up against Vetruvian?
I typically feel quite comfortable. They don't really have the early threats that a lot of other factions offer, so it allows me time to build a board and then basically choose which threats I want to press against them, whether it's going with an Archon, going with a Jax. They still have some answers in the form of Star's Fury, and you always have to be careful of Blind Scorch Thin Rui combos, but um, careful play will let you sort of choose which threat and when to press against them. And overall, I feel the matchup is quite comfortable. Uh, Furthermore, because you have Hailstone Prison and Chromatic Cold, which are basically the best answers to uh, Amara Healer, which is their strongest in-faction minion, in my opinion, and any other big threats which they're oftentimes forced to use.
Okay, so I'm just going to pause there and just go back a little bit. So I think the mulligan was pretty straightforward. Obviously, you want a 2-drop, and because we have 2-drop, we can keep Fenrir. Um,
Hmm.
were you thinking about when replacing Hailstone? Was there any threats you had in mind when considering to replace that, or was it a pretty straightforward decision?
When replacing Hailstone on the first turn.
Yeah, well, if to or not. What was going through your head there?
Uh, yeah. So, if I did, I actually, in retrospect, think that may have been a mistake. Since Vetruvian can't does really have a big problem if they fall behind early, and using Hailstone for that purpose is oftentimes quite useful. So in this matchup, I think that's a card I'm slightly more inclined to keep. If they go something like double two here and they're already dropping their hand with minions that have opening gambit, then the value deteriorates fairly quickly because I don't want to send back like a healing mystic
Yeah,
and just heal him up again, especially when he's gone second. Now I'm looking more to uh, outvalue him, is how I would put this. Give him
okay.
yeah, is to basically out resource him very quickly, and then when he's basically, if he has to be playing 2 cards a turn to keep up, if I can put him on 3 cards a turn, and eventually he may have a weak turn because he could only play a 2-on-4 or something like that, or just didn't, or sometimes doesn't even have a play because situational spells or so forth. That's basically where I'm looking to snowball the game.
Yeah, well, I actually think there is some merit in keeping the Hailstone, even just for a 2-drop. Um, if we don't guarantee, since we don't have a guaranteed draw of doing a 2-drop, if
Hmm.
I was in that position where I have that 2-drop active in the Fenrir, I know I'm trying to grab both mana tiles there, and it means I'm not going to be able to clear with the help of my Healing Mystic plus my General. So it can just be as simple as, maybe my opponent plays 1 minion, I play Fenrir on the mana tile, and my opponent now has a clear board while I have 2 minions on board. So I think there's some warrant of the tempo and just curving out with both mana tiles, which is something I really value doing. But then at the
Hmm.
same time, in that situation, you could pretty easily clear with Healing Mystic and your general attack and then block off the mana tiles. Um, in this situation, I think it turned out fine just keeping, or either way, because it's always a pretty good card to have.
Hmm.
So we've talked a lot about, a pretty simple decision there, but I think there's a lot of merit in that discussion. Okay, so here we place the second Hailstone. I think that's pretty warranted considering his board. So
Hmm.
we'll just pause it again. Not too much to talk about on this one, but there's a couple of decisions to be made. What are you thinking on this one?
So there are only 2 real choices here, and that's to walk the Healing Mystic down, go up, place the Fenrir on the tile, and then Hailstone the 3/3 while attacking the 2/3 with your General.
Yep.
And the second one is to use the Healing Mystic and the General to hit the 2/3, and then to drop a Fenrir, leaving 2 mana tiles available on the board. Um, and the thoughts when going into this are, it's really important to think about what the opponent is then able to do on the following turn with the potential mana available, and whether or not you're getting the trades you want to be getting. So I feel slightly. So I believe I decided to just drop the Fenrir and save the Hailstone Prison.
Yep.
Um, and the reason I chose to do this is because I actually want the middle tile to be able to uh, begin infiltrating and blocking his general off, as your cards, particularly Jax, gets a lot more value when you can infiltrate. Since if you can actually push onto their end of the board, dropping a Jax True Sight is oftentimes game ending.
Yeah, definitely.
Uh, because Star Fury now can only clear 2 of potentially 5 mini Jaxes. Um, and if I give up this, so if I now walk down, I'm not using the Healing Mystic to get a trade that I want. I still get a general hit, which is nice. But now my Fenrir is on the far end of the map. My general has given up the mid position. I've just given him back a 2-drop. which has a useful opening gambit effect that's going to help him preserve the board
Yep.
by adding more health to his Primus Fist.
Yeah.
And it plays into double 2 on 4 mana really, really well and lets him replenish his hand. And basically make the most powerful on curve play and take best positioning. So I chose not to follow that path.
Okay, so where did you end up placing the Fenrir? Was it on the middle tile? Or was it...
I, I I believe I would have placed it on the middle tile, but I would have to watch the replay to be sure.
we'll just see. Because there
Because
is definitely
that's a
value
sticky
in
minion.
putting it on the
Yeah.
mana tile, just to deny it, but... Okay, so there's lots of decisions here. And there's none that are strictly better. Denying the mana tile could also be good if we think our opponent's gonna... just gonna pause it there for a second.
Hmm.
Did you consider walking down the Healing Mystic and then trading and blocking off the mana tile? Or was that not really something you considered? Because it's actually a nice intricacy of the position is that if you have that, then for the Healing Mystic to be able to walk through, obviously it can't walk through diagonally without a general hit, then the general can't go to the other mana tile. So
Hmm.
it kind of prevents a play where your opponent can go to both mana tiles, or is that not really something
Hmm.
you were too worried about?
No, so it's not, and in principle, and it's something I certainly considered. In principle, uh, I don't believe accelerating to 5 mana is particularly important unless you can actually walk onto the tile and
Yeah, that is
play a
definitely
Dancing
something I
Blades
agree
or
with a lot. Yeah.
I think accelerating to 4, accelerating to 6. These are the important breaking points, or accelerating to 5 when you can directly walk on. So, uh, especially when you consider like in faction minions, like Portal Guardian on 3, which isn't really played. I mean, you would like the biggest punish for this is if they played like a chaos elemental and a 2-drop, and I don't see that as a
Yeah.
as a concern for myself. And if I just place, I mean, I could have technically denied more mana tiles by, let's say I walk the Healing Mystic 2 forward and then place the Fenrir on the tile. uh, he can still just general hit and then walk down and use the mana tile if he needs to. And then when choosing to place the Fenrir in the middle as opposed to actually on the tile, he already has access to um, having one tile or the other at this point. So it and using 2 is pretty unrealistic. So the hope is that he'll actually position his minions in a sense that he wants to. He can't just like completely concede a mana tile, right? Because then I can protect it with a sticky minion like Fenrir, and
Yep.
then be much more likely to accelerate to 5 or 6. Walking onto the tile for 5 Dancing Blades, which I run 3 of, or getting onto 6s, especially game winning very early on. Furthermore, I think there is a massive importance to being the first to use your general to clear minions and having and giving your general something useful to do every turn. So, in every variation of the previous turn, I would have had my general making a hit on the 2/3,
Okay, yep.
such that I'm already starting to clear the minion away. And now, if I had walked the Healing Mystic 2 forward to try and block off this mana tile, he can actually position the Healing Mystic. He can walk it uh, down right one of where it currently is,
Yep.
and then make a hit on the Mystic in a good trade for him. Walk the general down, still have access to that mana tile if he wants it, and then my general is actually left with nothing to hit on the following turn, especially that 3/1 Mystic, which seems like a very juicy target to hit, because
Yep.
I certainly don't want that 3/1 going into the Fenrir.
Yeah, excellent. There's definitely a lot of intricacies to the position, and I think it's further compounded by the fact that our is this on his turn? Yeah, so he's only going to have 3 cards in hand, and so the worst case like scenario in my mind for this play where we don't deny either of the mana tiles is that maybe I believe he can go triple 2-drop, but with 3 cards in hand that's very unlikely, and with Fenrir it's going to clean up pretty well on that board.
Hmm.
So definitely a lot of decisions to this play, and going for this kind of play, I think there's a good chance that we can, maybe block off and protect the mana tile next turn, where we could even potentially ramp into Jax if we drew something like that. Alright, so
Certainly.
we'll resume the replay. That was a long time on what I thought was going to be a simple turn, but actually looking into it, there's a ton of stuff to talk about.
Well, those turns actually usually, dictate the rest of the game in a lot of ways. So I think they're pretty important.
Yeah, it's definitely something that separates the good players from the great players. And it's what allows players like yourself to go on such massive win streaks all the way up to rank 1. Alright, so are you already thinking, what kind of are you leaning towards, replacing at the start of your turn? On my opponent's turn, I kind of like to think about that a bit, and then obviously it'll get changed by their plays.
Mm-hmm. So this has already become a worst case scenario.
Yeah.
Having the siphon was really destructive.
Yeah, that was definitely, probably if you could craft his hand, that would be pretty similar. But it still gives us the option, we still can possibly protect the mana tile or ramp into a 5-drop.
Mm-hmm.
So he hasn't punished us mana-wise completely. So here, what are you thinking replacing-wise? My instinct says maybe Razorback. But then with Fenrir on the board, it definitely makes it more tempting to keep it.
Mm-hmm.
Because I feel like we're always playing Fenrir in this turn, most likely.
Yeah, I'm probably inclined to. I don't remember exactly what I did, but looking at it now, I'd be inclined to replace Razorback or nothing at all.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, I'm certainly wanting to play the Fenrir here, and I don't want to fall behind too far on board. I can do nothing to protect this mana tile, but I do want to prevent as much infiltration as possible.
Yep.
So that's why I position my general directly in front of him.
And it's important to note here.
And
oh, sorry. Go ahead.
So I have concerns about. I basically couldn't do anything to prevent him from getting to 6 here. And using a hailstone is also very concerning, knowing that an Amara could come down. But I felt a little more comfortable knowing that I had the Chromatic Cold in hand.
Yeah. And something to note that hailstoning the Artifact Hunter, if he decides to replay it and even play a 2-drop, it's going to put him at 6 cards, I believe, which will make any future hailstone draws a lot better.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I actually I'm wondering if on the earlier turns replacing a second hailstone when I had 2 of them was the correct decision because their value does sort of go up the more you have in a sense because if
Yes,
you can get an
definitely.
early hailstone off, even if it's just to return the minion to the hand, subsequent hailstones are almost assuredly going to remove the minion entirely.
It's definitely a tricky thing because I think if you're definitely against other factions, you can definitely consider that kind of play. With Vetruvian, we still tend to think of them as having a lot of 2-drops and kind of lower value minions, more spell kind of heavy. So it's still not very clear if you want it. Obviously, this is a situation where he's played Artifact Hunters, so obviously that's when we would have wanted that play. But
Mm-hmm.
I think in general it's a fine decision. I don't think anyone could fault you for getting rid of the second Hailstone when we don't have a target on board. So are you thinking a replace here?
Looks
Are you
like I
going with
went
the
with the
Primus?
Primus Fist. I probably would have replaced the Razorback if I had it to do again.
Okay, yeah. I'm quite a
Um,
greedy player. I would almost replace the heal a Rejuvenator, but that's me
oh.
being a bit greedy with my health.
It's just such an important card in my position.
Yeah.
Okay, so I can't do anything about this Artifact Hunter, but I can prevent it from getting good trades on me. And he just has played 2 Artifact Hunters, right? So I have to be 100% aware of a Staff of Yakir, of any Wildfire Onks. There's always going to be a threat of a Star's Fury now that he's post 5 mana. So I chose to not bring the Fenrir directly 2 down because then there's too good of a trade for the Artifact Hunter, and but choosing between the positioning here, I wanted to have these minions be relevant, but also, and I was choosing between putting the Healing Mystic directly in front of the Fenrir or directly behind the Fenrir,
Yep.
and I think my thinking process is well, I'm not entirely sure if that was the uh, correct play. I was thinking that if he wanted to play a Dancing Blades, which is probably one of the strongest things he could do on this turn, I'd
Yep.
rather have him play into the Fenrir than into the Healing Mystic,
Yep.
since uh, while you're technically hitting a more valuable minion, you're actually not removing any more power from the board. And I want to be able to have more targets to hit with the Razorback and Primus Fist I already had in my hand.
Yeah, I
So even
definitely
though
would
you,
rather the Fenrir get hit.
yeah, yeah. So that's roughly the lines I was thinking.
Yeah.
Um,
The merit to playing him the other way around, switching the position, is that if he went down and equipped Staff of the Cure and Wildfire, he could clear that. But I don't even know if that's something he would do, and that's something you have to consider first. Am I playing something around my opponent would even do? And he's going
mhm.
to take one charge. Fenrir is going to hit another one. Maybe he'd do it if he had nothing better, but I think playing around Dancing Blades is probably more relevant and it's probably better value anyway. So
Oh, I
I don't
do
think.
remember now the other thing I was thinking. So he knows the deck I'm playing, and he knows the value of infiltration to it. And my thinking was, I want to actually encourage him further back,
Okay, yep.
such that if he tries to move the artifact hunter and then move his general down or infiltrate in a way, then or infiltrate to my side, or basically hit one of the middle tiles and try to push
Yep.
back, then the Healing Mystic will be relevant. Whereas if I play it too forward and it's not so bad to force him onto like a bottom tile, but with that artifact hunter already down there, I may have lost a little too much board control in that small area, and if he makes a good turn, then I may have difficulty repelling him back into his half,
Okay,
without
yep.
the Healing Mystic being relevant.
Yeah, that definitely makes a lot of sense. That's yeah, definitely something I didn't consider too much. I'm not an expert Vanar by any means. Um, he does have access to this middle tile, which is obviously a tile he would want, but just having that everything, focusing on that point definitely makes it a lot harder for him. Because if you're him, there's only one spot that avoids a minion attack, which is always something you kind of want to at least consider.
Hmm.
Because it's almost like I always compare it to earning free beam shocks. So you can move back here and here, and then you've effectively stunned the minion and made it do nothing. So it's definitely something to consider. I really like that idea of keeping the
Yeah,
enemy general from going backwards, from forwards, and he actually goes backwards, which
yeah.
is
Uh, I'm also not worried about getting bursted down by Vetruvian. I care a lot more about winning the board and then dropping a single threat that they can't deal with.
okay. Yep. Okay.
So that was about as much burst as they can offer.
Yeah. I mean, luckily you're not as greedy as me, and you kept the Emerald Rejuvenator.
Yeah.
It's my Songhai mentality coming in, just all or nothing. So we have some options to knock down the charges of the artifact. What are you thinking here? Okay, I really like this play because I think we can afford to get close to his general. Um, Follow-ups. Fenrir is a little bit awkward, so I'm imagining you're going for the 4 and the 2.
Yep. Yep. To do as much to prevent myself from getting blasted, dancing blades, so forth.
Yep.
Here. And typically, I don't think I attack him here because, as a principle, I say either knock off all the artifact charges or knock off none.
Yep.
Because there's almost no point to making an attack that like they want to be making for them.
Yeah, and there's like unless you can put them in a situation where they can't use the blast or something very effectively,
Hmm.
then do you think there was merit to swapping the Emerald Rejuvenator and the Primus around? There's not a lot that can clear it Primus and let him clear here. Maybe like a Rushar's First Wish. Do you think there's any merit, or would you prefer just have your Rejuvenator more central?
Um, I think there was merit there. On second glance, I also wonder if it was worthwhile to actually use the Fenrir to knock off a charge. Maybe it would have been better to just walk him 2 forward. Although then
Okay.
he still has the potential of getting blasted.
Mm.
Um, so it's a little bit tough to say in that sense. Because as soon as you start stacking lots of minions, you're always going to get. There's always going to be potential for the opponent to hit multiple targets.
Yeah.
And I am playing with my life a little bit dangerously here. Uh, yeah.
I think there is merit to having the Emerald Rejuvenate at the end of the board as well, just in case, maybe he walks back, blasts the Rejuvenator, plays the 2-drop, and then Dancing Blades the 3/3 instead of, um, if the 2/3 was there, he would have to blast the 2/3 in order to Dancing Blades the Fenrir. So that's
I see.
something minor to keep in mind. But
Okay.
also, you want your Rejuvenator clearing the board, and it's easier for it to be clearing the minions he plays. It's very easy if it's on the edge of the board for him to keep it out of an attack range. Okay, so
So with this Rejuvenator, he actually managed to survive. Well, actually, no, because he had the second staff equipped, so I couldn't have killed him with the Fenrir Spirit of the Wild yet. But
yeah,
having any minions on board, I mean, the staff saves him. Without the staff and the healing, it would have been lethal. So that card is almost definitely not leaving my hand
yeah,
because of its importance.
yeah. You definitely want your finishers at this part of the game, especially Vetruvian's not great at clearing minions if they don't have minions on their own, and just anything that sticks is just a massive threat to finish off with Razorback Spirit of the Wild.
Hmm.
So yeah, I think I'd be inclined to keep this whole hand, even though it might be a bit off curve this time, depending on you. Chromatic Cold is very good against an Amara or something like that,
Hmm.
which you need to have an answer for, I think.
At this point, I was choosing between. Uh, you might want to pause this because this
Yeah.
because this was a turn I actually thought quite a bit about. Um, I was choosing between a hailstone and playing, say, like and also a Fenrir Razorback play,
Yep.
um, which I think I would have been a little more inclined to. But given my health and the possibility of having an Aurora's Tears come out,
Yep.
I felt uncomfortable leaving even a single charge of an artifact up,
Yeah, definitely.
since that technically would represent, uh, and I don't want to be making that attack for him since he's trying to pressure my life. I certainly didn't want to hit him, and if I leave a single charge up, then it represents 2 damage from the artifact and 2 damage for 1 mana for every tears he potentially has. So I did feel it was necessary to use both of these minions to make a clearance here.
Okay, so with the using the Razorback, it doesn't really increase the survivability of your minions. So did you do this play thinking it's unlikely that the game will go much longer where I'll get a Razorback that'll hit more than 2 minions and this is the damage I'm going to get and puts a lot of pressure on him, or what was the
Yeah, I
reasoning
decided
behind
that
that?
I wasn't gonna hit more than 2 targets after this, choosing between playing Fenrir and Razorback at this point, because I'm already committed to trading these two in at this point, and if I just play the Fenrir, then I'm only gonna have a Fenrir left on board. Um, and having just used the Hailstone, there was also a consideration to then I would have had 1 more mana to play with if I had used the Fenrir. I could have Chromatic Colded and saved a 5/2 for myself.
Yep.
Um, But at that point, I just don't have an answer if an Amara comes down on 8 and then into Time Maelstrom. I would just lose the game. I wasn't comfortable
Mm.
giving up both my single target removals for that purpose.
Okay, so if he had
Um,
a Maya and we went for this play, it would be yeah, it would be. Well, we wouldn't have the thing, so it would be 5 damage, 7 damage, and there's no way you can burst through Amaya and like kill Amaya and burst through him. So, yeah, I definitely think there's definitely some solid logic because you want to curve out as well. Like this is a bit better than
yes.
playing Chromatic Cold.
Yeah, I've chosen the positioning for the Fenrir as well because no matter where he goes with his general, the Razorback, or sorry, not the Fenrir, the Razorback positioning is going to be able to hit him.
Yep.
I've knocked off the charge. I'm actually ahead on life and board now. I'm playing around Dancing Blades. I'm playing around Star's Fury.
Yeah.
Um,
That positioning it's very subtle, but it's definitely excellent. It's probably the best. I can't really think of anywhere I would consider better. Plays around everything. and we also know that he's not going to be able to get off his side of the board, so Spirit of the Wild will be a very strong finisher.
Yeah, I still have 2 turns to use Spirit of the Wild at this point.
Yeah.
Realistically, if I'm blocking him off with my general, because he can't just give the Razorback free access. He has to minion block at that point, and then I can put my general in front of his. Is the
Yeah.
thinking here? So typically, if you can get right in front of them, they can advance at the very most 1 tile laterally per turn.
Yeah.
And
As
they
it's been.
actually only need to be on the middle tile for Spirit of the Wild to matter.
Yeah.
For
Well,
Frosttorn Rhino
yeah.
particular, but for other minions they can be a full tile in.
Yeah.
So at this point I'm feeling comfortable with. I feel like I won the positioning battle, and now it's just going to be a matter of playing carefully to not get lethaled by a time maelstrom if possible,
Yep.
and find. Ooh, yeah.
Yeah. So this
Find
is
lethal.
definitely one of the better tries for Vetruvian to come back in this game. It's awkward amount of health for you, and I think that's probably one of the better options. Okay, so that's a decent draw because you're not going to be able to clear the artifacts, so there's no point, hitting and chromatic
Yeah,
holding.
exactly.
So,
I'm very worried about tiers here. I'm worried about time maelstrom, but realistically, there's nothing I can do. So what I say is, well, let's just play to how I can win the game.
yeah,
uh, yeah, and knowing that he has the blast, I think I thought a while about the positioning here, and I wanted him to be able to have the least impactful blast as possible. If I come off the wall, it's just gonna lend too much value to Star's Fury. He's already gonna get a lot of Star's Fury value. So I can't walk too forward with the general and then place behind, because then he can just swoop down and hit a bunch of targets. There may have been merit to going 2 forward, I suppose, and then playing the jacks against the wall, 1 up from where the
yeah.
mini jacks spawned. Um,
Interesting. Yeah,
yeah,
it is interesting because you also, yeah, the thing is, healing mystic. It's very hard for you to find a good spot for it that's not near your general, and if you're playing the jacks away, then it's going to be able to blast all 3.
yeah,
Whereas with this, because you can't really play it up in this corner here or anything, because then you can just run away. So I actually really like his positioning.
yeah. I guess it stayed relevant. I've maybe given him 1 extra Star's Fury, but I believe I did the calculation to make sure I wasn't lethaled on Star's Fury.
Yep.
Primus Fist.
Okay. Yep. Yeah. That's.
If that were a thing. And I don't believe I almost certainly am not, right, because I'm at 13, so that's
Yeah.
completely comfortable. If he has that combination with time maelstrom, then I think it's a little dodgier, right, because he's 4/4, and then he would need to find 2 more damage, because actually only one of the Star's Fury targets can hit my general.
Yeah. So for
Um,
rush hours or something maybe, but it's
yeah,
not. Yeah. This is definitely a fairly safe, like as safe as you can be. And I think it's very important not to allow him to blast your general and your healing mystic and like get a 1/1. You don't want him to blast your general and hit one of these ones that are not going to get killed by Star's Fury.
yeah.
So letting him kill things that were outside of range of Star's Fury are pretty
Oh, I
important.
believe I also chose the positioning of the healing mystic in front instead of behind, because if Star's Fury gets played and then he takes out the jacks right in front, then he can actually walk down, blast me, blast the healing mystic,
Yep.
blast the jacks behind. So this way he actually can't use the Star's Fury for that purpose. And I think this is lethal now, because of that beautiful card, Spirit of the Wild.
Yep. Looks like it should be. Yeah, definitely. So it's definitely good to see this card gaining more and more popularity. And just giving Vanar like reliable finishes is always going to be massive. All right, so
Yeah.
go on.
Dream Gazer also works really well with Spirit of the Wild. If you need 2 more damage, if you need another buff target for Razorback, like that's actually the incredible thing. Like when you can do really massive amounts of
Yeah.
damage using Dream Gazer and Razorback from no minions on board, it's kind of crazy.
Yeah, it's definitely not something you expect when you're versing Vanar, and I think people will slowly adjust to it. Like I know I'm gonna definitely be a little bit more careful, um, but it's not something you're used to. So if you're happy to do one, that one did go for quite a while. If you're happy to just do one more while we're here,
Sure.
we can do that. The video might go for a little bit long, but I think this has been very valuable so far. So I'm just going to quickly black out once again, and we are going to do a game versus Magma, I believe.
I believe so.
Versus LQD Brunt. Very good player. As you can see, he was rank 3 at the time of this, or maybe it's current. I think I'm rank 3 at the moment actually, but yeah, very good player. I actually know him from Duel of Champions. If any of those viewers are still around. So mulligan decisions, pretty simple there. We basically just want 2 drops and 3 drops, right?
Mhm.
How often, when you're going first, are you replacing Fenrir? So say you just had Fenrir and 2 irrelevant cards, would you keep the Fenrir, or are you always looking for a 2 drop more than anything?
If I'm going first?
Yeah.
It depends on the matchup a little bit, but Fenrir is typically such an important card for getting board control early and letting me snowball my my buff minions, like having more targets for Razorback, Primus Fist, and so forth. That I'm more often than not inclined to keep it.
Yeah, it's just such a high power level card. Maybe against Vetruvian, I can see maybe some merit to replacing it. Because if you have no turn 1 play and then your turn 2 play is answered very easily, you can get behind quite quickly. But I think otherwise, I agree. Fenrir is a pretty good start. Alright, so our opponent has a pretty good start here. With the turn
Yeah,
2
the
Archon.
turn 2 Archon is usually quite a good play.
So were you not inclined there to deal with it with a Chromatic Cold and trading in general? And because you replaced the Chromatic Cold pretty fast there. Was there some part of you
Yeah,
that wanted to...
Chromatic Cold just doesn't tend to find a lot of value in this matchup unless you're hitting Silithar Elder and also able to clear the Agate at the same time. At this point, my decision was I can actually see my way to some decent trades here, since he's 1 mana off being able to Metamorphosis, which is like my major concern. If he leaves the Fenrir up, then I'll be able to use a Primus Fist to clear it off after if it doesn't do a general hit. If it does do a general hit, in that case, having the Chromatic Cold would have been useful.
Okay, yep. It's definitely
So maybe
a more proactive kind of way to answer it. I feel like trading in there, it deals with the Archon, but it's giving him immediate value, and you're not really advancing yourself too much. This way, having the Fenrir still intact, looking for like a very good trade. Only Eggmorph can really punish here, which isn't that common. Were you worried about Eggmorph at all?
I was actually okay with Eggmorph. That was my decision here. Because if I'm the Magmar player, I'm probably Eggmorphing the Fenrir.
Okay, yep. So it's more of a board control kind of game. The 7 damage is not going to be really very relevant.
Yeah, as long as you don't get bursted down, you're usually pretty okay.
Yep. I believe, especially with the Archons, there's a good chance you might be running, more control-y style anyway. And having Eggmorph already indicates that as well. And against the control, you're not as worried about the damage.
Yeah, so he got off to a pretty good start.
Yeah,
here,
there's no denying that.
And I was like, I just couldn't justify taking 7 face damage here.
Yeah.
Especially when I have like little minions that I think are going to be able to. I think I do double Jaxi here, because I'm thinking I'll be able to either do 1 damage, or if he leaves it up, I'll be able to Primus Fist and hit it. I saw a lot of ways having 2 Primus Fists and having 2 Jaxi that I don't have to take 7 face damage here.
This is such a sticky board.
I think I lost a dice roll that sort of made the game quite difficult for me.
Yeah. Spirit Harvester is not too much of a concern because it is going to kill off the Archon without it gaining value.
Exactly.
So.
Exactly. Yeah.
And yeah, it seems like your board is weak to Spirit Harvester, but then you look at it and basically, everything of his will end up, being really awkward or dying if he does. So.
Mhm. Yeah, so I see the Archon in my hand. That's one of the cards I'm looking for in this matchup, and I'm going to be hard mulling for Hearth Sister every turn hereafter.
Okay, yep.
Okay,
so getting an Eggmorph out right as you're about to play an Archon is always pretty good. Well, depending on what he plays, obviously.
Yeah, no, certainly.
So when we kind of fall behind in this matchup, what are some cards that you think can bring it back? Is it the Archons, the Jaxes? I know
Possibly.
in a
So
lot of yeah,
this is where I feel really bad because I'm like, oh man, I lost the. It was 3 out of 4 chances for that to be in a good
yeah.
corner. Just
That
Primus
always
Fist.
feels the worst. You're off to a
Now
bad
it's.
start, and then the Jax.
I'm like, I'm really uncomfortable running towards him. I suppose these are all just bad trades, unfortunately.
Yeah,
Um, right, because that thing is still at 3 health. Like, I don't have a way of actually cleaning it up, even with the Primus. If I had a Razorback, it would have been fine. So now, what I'm looking to do, and after this game, I think I threw in 2 Avalanche because I was like frustrated with the Magmar matchup.
yeah,
Uh,
yeah. See, it's
so
unfortunate that in a lot of matchups, if you're behind, you can kind of just Hail Mary, Jax True Sight, and but you can't really do that until control Magma, who might just Spirit Harvester it.
I mean, that is one of the other cards I'm looking for really aggressively now. So if I have a Jax and he doesn't have an answer for it, then I can then I can mount a serious comeback.
Yep.
I'm also just being careful to stay out of Metamorphosis range as best as possible.
Yep.
Um,
Yeah, you can see
or
the
Egmorph
positioning of
range,
Archon is really good.
such that the Archon, which is kind of my big threat here, uh, is able to hit him. So this is completely fine with me.
Yeah.
I don't mind taking 4 face damage.
Yeah,
The
a turn
Archon
like
is
that
still
is like something you need. You need like a less proactive turn to really have a chance after he just had a pretty ridiculous start, there's no denying. So something like that's not too bad.
like I'll still feel comfortable if I hit a Jax in the next turn or two. If I hit a Harsh Sister, I could see my way to a victory here.
Yep.
Um,
And it's quite an odd game. Like neither of you really want to kill off this mini Jax. I mean, I'm sure you'll probably do it to kill off the Mercantor, but it just makes it weaker to Spirit Harvester, which is something I've been touching on a lot. But it's really beneficial that his minions are also quite weak to Spirit Harvester. So with the Archon here, what are we thinking? Just keep it out of Metamorphosis egg range again?
yep, precisely. I mean, I need to get a little closer to him. The longer I wait, the more uncomfortable the position's going to get for me.
Yep. I mean, the slightly good news is that, a lot of Control Magmars aren't running Silver Elder anymore, so we do have a little bit more leeway running away, playing slowly. But
hmm
we are still definitely the aggro deck in this matchup.
So this that Jaxie spawn, you might have been like, okay, you won the 3 out of 4, right? But it's actually a big difference if it ends up on his side or if it ends up on my side, and you'll see why.
Okay, yep. So are we wanting it for his side, or?
No, you want it on your side where you
Yeah.
can control the play.
Yeah. I think there's like a tiny bit, maybe not in the Vanar matchup just because of how much important his side is. There's a tiny bit in other matchups where you kind of, this position where you can have a range minion on one side and then your general on the other, kind of makes some choices of which way he goes. But definitely,
hmm
running the infiltrate combo makes it, obviously you want the Jaxie on your side.
Yeah. Right now, I really, really wish I had that avalanche.
Yeah.
Like more than anything.
That would be pretty value. Okay, so still
Uh,
not another big threat, unfortunately.
no, still looking for Jack. Still looking for Heart Sister. There's not really like I can't run forward because as soon as I run forward, everything gets metamorphosis and I just I lose.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I'm willing to commit a little bit of resources here forward in a position that can get metamorphosis, is what I was thinking. As the general and the Archon sort of reach the same spot, he can metamorphosis a Jaxie, a Fenrir, and a Dreamgazer. And at that point, I'm like, well, that's pretty value metamorphosis from my end, so I'm not too worried about that.
Yeah.
But then I get mega punished by, you'll see.
Uh, yeah, it's definitely a very awkward situation if you be in. And even if we draw the Jax, like by now he might have. It depends how he's playing. If he's playing very cautious and thinking I need to have an answer to Jax, that's how I could lose this game. Things are getting worse. And there's been no like misplays or anything. But I think this game has still been very educational, just showing that constant metamorphosis, eggmorph, how you're playing that around. Because I feel like a lot of players they kind of just Like,
Yeah, so I
yeah,
wasn't expecting the blood tier rush
yeah,
to clear everything. I
yeah,
was like, oh,
yeah. That was pretty brutal.
what do I do now?
Yeah, but yeah, just playing around that Egg-Morph and Metamorphosis, it's very strong removal, but um, obviously you can't always play around it as we've just shown. But just
Hmm.
constantly thinking of those things, I think it'll be very educational for some people watching this. Like I know I try and play around Egg-Morph and Metamorphosis a bit, but I think, and I hardly ever see any control Magma a lot of the time, and playing Songhai, it's less important, but
Hmm.
it's less about always playing around it in some matchups, and more about playing around it when you're not going to lose anything by not. Sometimes you might play like you can play a Land Fox completely around it, but then it's not being range anything. It's not doing anything. But when you can
Yeah.
diagonally protect it with your general, and their general's in the corner, you're basically losing nothing by doing that. So it's about evaluating when you're not losing too much by playing around this kind of thing.
So with this positioning, I was actually hoping if I somehow managed to top deck a Rhino in Spirit of the Wild, I could actually have seen myself to a lethal
Okay,
there.
yeah, that's a
But
great
as
idea.
I did not have any of those cards, and he just played a Silmathar Elder,
Yeah.
I think there wasn't much for me to do.
I mean, it's still. I think it's
Since
still a very
yeah.
educational point there. Just playing to your outs. Can I get the Frosthorn Rhino, Spirit of the Wild combo? Just have any chance to win the game because I mean, I'm sure everyone will understand having watched that game. There wasn't really much you could do there. So
Yeah, that was a tough start. And he didn't make any mistakes. So
yeah. So do you think Vanar? Would you put that match up against Magma?
that's probably the toughest matchup at this point for me. It gets a little bit better when you throw the Avalanche back in, but they don't get punished by Avalanche as hard as other factions since they have the rebirth in a lot
Yeah,
of sense, and for
definitely.
a lot of their minions, you basically have to have a presence on that field or on that side of the field, or be
Yeah.
close enough to Avalanche and then infiltrate there and clean up the eggs or so forth. Otherwise, they'll just outvalue you, and they run so much healing with a guaranteed 3 Rejuvenators, 3 Mystics, and oftentimes at the very least 2 Earth Spheres.
Yeah.
Um,
And it's a bit counterproductive, having to go back and clear the eggs, and Avalanche is a very niche card. It's very situational. You don't want
yeah,
to have to add extra when you do it. So
yeah,
it's definitely very clear why the matchup is not too good. I think the amount of burst in this deck can maybe catch off some players off guard. So it might be better than a more standard Vanar that we've seen without the combo.
yeah. I highly prioritize going first in that matchup since you can dictate the positioning with your general a little bit better, and I really emphasize infiltration because if you constantly have the threat of Frosttorn Rhino Spirit of the Wild, um, your positional advantage in the game goes up like exponentially. Whereas as soon as he infiltrated quickly by flashing out an Archon, I couldn't dictate the positioning from there on, and he was never really in danger.
Yeah, it's very clear the difference last game, where you didn't get that terrible start, where you were able to dictate the position masterfully, put him on that side of the board, make him go one forward ahead. And with Spirit of the Wild, your opponent can be very far ahead, and you can hit them with minions and walk them forward. So it's definitely very clear to see how that early infiltrate can really have a massive effect because it's going to take them a very long time to get out of Spirit
Hmm.
of the Wild range. Alright, so
So the way I think about the card is against Linar, you're oftentimes and against the previous Third Wish vet, you were very inclined to clear their board every single turn because if you don't, then a Holy Immolation or a Third Wish just gets too much value, and you can't really answer it, right? Um, but the equivalent in the Vanar matchup is if they don't clear your board, then Spirit of the Wild can just lethal you from
yeah,
from massive range with even just a single minion. So as far as like broken cards go, I see people complain about Holy Immolation. I think Spirit of the Wild is one of the top 3 broken cards in the game.
wow, that's a big call right
And
there. It's not a card you see
yeah,
heaps, but when you see it, when you're not playing around, it really punishes you hard. I know I had a moment the other day where I was like, Yeah, I'm in a pretty good position. I've got board control against Vanar. They can't really burst me down too much, and then bam, Spirit of the Wild. That left me feeling a bit embarrassed. So definitely a very strong card. I love this deck. And the fact that you've been playing this pretty much the whole month. If I'm right there, you've been playing for most of the month.
Most. I played Vet to S rank, but quickly decided that was
Yeah.
not for me.
Because I remember at the start of the month, Songhai and Abyssium were everywhere, and especially Songhai. I think I saw, like, I know it changes from person to person, but I saw heaps of Songhai, and then to see
Mm,
climbing to number one on S rank with Vanar with all this Songhai around, it definitely says a lot about your skill in this deck. And I just love the idea. It's got a really solid late game plan. It's got burst to keep you relevant, and I think that is the way to go about the Songhai matchup. I see people playing really defensively, really afraid to take damage, always protecting their back, and I can just kite them and then close it out with Cyclone Mask very easily. But this one is putting the
hmm
clock back on your opponent, and if Songhai can definitely struggle with cards like Fenrir and Jaxi, and you're really punishing it hard when you do get that board control.
Yeah, exactly. You kind of you aim to race Songhai a little bit, and if you and conceptually, it took me a while to reach this conclusion, but like if you present the opportunity to race with your minions, and they have to trade, then you drop a Jax, and that's just one of the most devastating cards
Yeah,
in the matchup.
yeah, and early Jacks, like if you're in an even position or ahead on board, Jacks can just close that game out so easily. If they try to race it, it's very hard to erase a Razorbacked Jacks, and they're gonna have to spend so much mana and so many cards clearing those 1/1s if
Hmm
they don't have a board. Alright, so this has gone on for quite a while. It's gone for nearly an hour. But I think that was really instructive. I think the first game was great and just showed how the subtleties in positioning, and that's what I love about Vetruvian as well. Positioning is very important in that faction, playing with
hmm
it and against it. And we showed how you slowly put them on the other side of the board. Magma, it's very generous of you to pick to show us a loss, even though it was the only loss on your match history. But there's still a lot of educational points, playing around Metamorphosis, um, showing that difference in positioning from going first and second. Definitely I learnt a lot, and I'm sure everyone watching learnt a ton as well. So if there's any shout-outs you want to do, where people can find you, Twitch, all that kind of thing, now's a chance to go ahead.
I stream occasionally, so if you are interested in seeing that, do the follow thing, and I usually come on maybe once a week or so. But we talk about deck building, and it's usually mostly serious stuff. Yeah, and thanks again, Uno, for having me on, man. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Yeah, massive thanks. I feel like I've learned heaps, and I'm sure everyone has as well. Alright, so guys, if you want to see more of this kind of thing, make sure to like and subscribe. Massive thanks to The Scientist for coming on, and I'll see you next time.